Jan, you haven't set up your camera yet.
It's the same issue that happened from the last time. I sent you the thing to replace it. You should have already fixed it.
You didn't tell me it was still broken.
I haven't been using it for 2 months.
What happened to your camera?
There's a conflict with some of the drivers. It's not being updated by G-Hub correctly, so I just unplugged it, said fuck it.
Oh.
Don't worry, I'll fix it. Anyway, welcome to GVN Live, everybody. I am Fight Club Hubs, and welcome to the 78th episode of the show. With me is Jan and Mark. No Mr. Pure Instinct today. He's kind of like an on-again, off-again guest host person thing. So, hopefully he'll join us for future episodes. I'm looking forward to it. Tonight's episode is pretty much going to include discussions about the easily abusable YouTube copyright strike policy. We're going to be talking about the redesign in regards to YouTube or GameStop's new design stores, aka like land centers that they're building. We're going to be taking a look at the craziness. Well, this is in regards to the YouTube strike policy. We're going to be looking at the craziness involved with the guy by the name of John Hancock, who has been trying to build a video game museum for the last several years. And the last thing we're going to be talking about is the preservation of flash games. But to start things off, let's do the round table and see how everyone is doing. Jan, how are you? What you been up to?
Oh, I'm good. I finally finished my Blue Lions playthrough of Fire Emblem last night. That was very emotional.
Yay!
There's a reason why I made it my my game of the year for 2019. The ending was basically everything I had hoped it would be. We were able to get all of the pair-ups and the people out exactly the way we wanted to as well, so that worked out pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
May or may not have cried at the end, but that's fine.
Don't lie, you cried.
Oh, I know I did. Other than that, not much. Just sort of doing the work thing and trying to figure out what I'm going to play next for my my Monday streams.
Okay. How about you, Mark? How are you doing today?
I'm alive.
Yay!
Yeah, that's usually how I feel about it too.
Right?
Beyond that, I don't really have a lot going on to discuss. I have been playing Borderlands 3 a bit with my friends Joel and Sean.
How's that going?
I mean, it's Borderlands, you know. They put in some new mobility mechanics, which they then abuse the shit out of to have you do various jumping puzzles, which I hate jumping puzzles in first-person shooters. I don't understand why, unless the game is specifically designed around this sort of mechanic, a la a Mirror's Edge, why people are like, this is a thing that needs to be in our otherwise shooty first-person shooters. Like, I don't want to fucking do this. I don't know anybody who wants to fucking do this. I have never had a conversation with somebody who was like, man, I really love it when they put jumping puzzles into my first-person shooters.
Well, I haven't heard anyone complain about it in the Metroid Prime games, so...
I mean, the Metroid Prime games, the way that they structure it is kind of a completely different beast, but for reference purposes, like, that's, again, kind of sort of what you come to expect from a Metroid game. You know, there's going to be jumping in a Metroid game, you get that. But, like, you know, I have seen many, many people curse the fucking jumping puzzles in Half-Life, for example, so...
Oh, yeah.
I would say, by and large, it is not a desirable thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's good. It's probably the best game that Gearbox has ever put out. And it's a fun game to just play and enjoy. Plus, the game, as I understand it, is basically just cheap now everywhere.
So you're saying this game is even better than their last masterpiece, which was Aliens Colonial Marines?
That was not the last game that they made, motherfucker.
But still, that is an undeniable masterpiece, wouldn't you say?
No. I mean, in the same way that Piss Christ is a masterpiece, sure.
Good. I mean, it only took a fan to fix the AI to make that game actually playable. It's fine.
Yeah, and literally all they did was change like one line of code.
It was one piece of code. That was the best part.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the game
bad for Xbox
is
users,
on
though.
sale basically everywhere, and it's probably the best game that Gearbox has made. It's definitely better than Aliens versus whatever the fuck. Aliens Colonial Marines. I don't even feel like that's anything remotely close to a controversial statement. But yeah, it's also on sale now, I think permanently. I got it for $25. According to Amazon right now it's at $33.
Okay. What
I
system
don't
are you playing it
know.
on?
I'm playing it on PlayStation 4.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate because my friend Kane only has it on Xbox One, and like the one thing I don't like about it is that they don't have any kind of cross anything. So like I don't expect cross play necessarily because that's kind of an odd pipe dream that we're discussing at this point. But even like cross saves, so if you wanted to take a character that you leveled up on PlayStation 4 and bring it over to the Xbox One would be fine, you know? But yeah, I think I would just like to be able to play a 4-person game with it. And at this point, like I can do 3-person, which is fun, but it would be nice to have like a 4-person game to like just once or twice. But yeah, it's good and it's cheap, so I'm all for it.
Woohoo! Okay, for me, I haven't really played much of anything. I stopped by Best Buy on my way home from having dinner with my parents for their 40th anniversary. So I grabbed a few things. Let's see here. I got Crystar. That was a whim pickup. I remember seeing previews for this game, and I was just like, wow, this is a pretty stylized looking anime game, and I kind of want to play it. It's got some really mixed reviews on Metacritic right now, but I'm still willing to get it. I got Link's Awakening amiibo.
Like you mentioned that you bought that, and I was like, oh, what is this? Oh, that looks kind of cute. $60! Get the fuck out of here!
I got it for $50. It was on clearance.
Wow. That's unfortunate.
It's actually more expensive on Amazon, so.
What? Get the fuck out of here.
No, yeah. Best Buy was selling it for $10 cheaper. But yeah, so I got my little Link's Awakening amiibo. I got Richter Belmont. And Dark Samus. I haven't bought an amiibo in a while, so there we go. Ta-da. So, there we go. Outside of that, I'm going to try and get back into playing some games that I haven't finished from last year before, March approaches, the Destroyer of Wallets.
That's what tax refunds are for, man.
When I find time for taxes, when I find time to do taxes. But aside from that, we are going to move on to our first topic of discussion, and it is one that Jan brought to our attention. So, Jan, enlighten us with this amazing news that you felt was so fucking important to tell us.
Google made a Stadia. Well, actually, they didn't. But they have a service that's like a Stadia, that they say that you can play on any of your specific things. So PC, Mac, Android, and Shield. Where, hey, you know what's really cool about it? Is it's cloud gaming. But it connects to existing PC stores. So it connects to things like Epic and Steam and EA.
Ken.
Yeah.
You meant Nvidia.
Huh?
You said Google. You meant Nvidia.
I meant Nvidia. Yeah, whatever.
You meant Nvidia.
I meant Nvidia. Anyway.
Was that
yeah,
Satan?
So... No.
Have some cake.
Have some cake.
That cake is a
No,
lie.
I'm sorry. So no, Nvidia made a Stadia, but it's not really Stadia. It's just a service. But yeah, it connects to other PC stores, so like Epic and Steam and EA, and allows you to stream any of the games that you own through those platforms. But it's not all of the games. It's only specific games because it has to be supported by Nvidia RTX or just the Nvidia GeForce experience, like in general. So you will either already own the games or you will buy the games and then you can stream them wherever you want to on any of those devices. For a whopping $4.99 a month, you can have an extended play session, which they don't actually tell you how long that session is, to actually play those games on a streaming platform through NVIDIA's GeForce Go or GeForce Now or whatever it's called service. So I don't know. I don't understand why people feel like this is even remotely a good idea.
I don't know. I mean, you would think that with how badly the Stadia has been failing the past several months from whenever it finally decided to release, you would think Nvidia would look at this and be like, huh, that's not a good idea. But let's do it anyway.
But you own the games, Hubs. You
I mean,
own the
yes.
games.
You already own the game,
like-
so you don't have to
it's-
worry about
I-
Google like suddenly shutting down the service and then you losing those games. That I understand.
Like, in a broad sense, I get the concept of what they're trying to do here, right? They're giving you the ability to play these games that you own anywhere. So instead of, having to have your laptop with you everywhere you go, or having to have your desktop with you everywhere you go, you can have a much lighter weight device and play remotely. But in actuality, in my brain, it's just going, just what I always wanted. Games I already own, but with lag.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, this isn't
Where's the lie?
this isn't a difficult concept, right? If I'm going to be playing these games remotely with a device, I'm either going to be using cellular phone data, which is just going to murder my data plan unless I have hundreds of dollars to spend on unlimited data, or I'm using, some kind of lower quality service that
Right.
doesn't have any real control over what the actual functionality of it is, like a Cricket Mobile or whatever. If I'm like, I just don't see a lot of benefit for this. If I'm like sitting at the doctor's office, I'm just gonna play a mobile phone game. I don't need to have Void Bastards available or Cuphead on my mobile phone for the 10 minutes I'm waiting or the 20 minutes I'm waiting in the doctor's office. And if I'm going on a trip in some way, shape, or form, even if it's like a work trip and I want to have my games with me, like, why wouldn't I just bring a fucking laptop with those games installed on them?
Exactly.
Like, why? Like, of what benefit would it be to attempt to play anything that I own, but with shitloads of lag from playing on hotel Wi-Fi? Like,
But
who hates
hotel
themselves
Wi-Fi
enough
is
to
so
do
cutting
this?
edge.
Yeah. Like, who
I
hates
think-
themselves enough that they would want to do this?
Like, I understand the concept of cloud gaming. I understand the concept of, like, the cloud in general and having access to things, like, 24/7. Like, it makes sense. But at the same time, when you play a game, you expect it to not have a problem. You expect it to not have that lag. And if you're going to continue to push this concept of cloud gaming with Nvidia, whose, let's be honest, infrastructure is not going to be nearly as big or powerful as Google's, and Google's is still poop. Okay? Like, why would anyone want to pay you money for this? Now, granted, there is a free option that gives you the ability to play everything through the streaming service for free that you own for 1 hour at a time. But again, why? What's who is actually the person that you're trying to market this technology to? Because it sure as shit ain't real gamers. So to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why are companies spending so much money on this cloud infrastructure that just makes no sense? Because the content delivery isn't going to be good. Like, this is a big reason why I'm afraid of what Series X is going to do with that whole Project X cloud that Microsoft is trying to push, where you owned the game on your console and you go onto another console or another device and play the games being streamed from your console to that other device. It's the same concept. It doesn't have a good market share. And so to continue to see companies just dump infrastructure and cash into what's already a sinking ship, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it just feels like they're throwing the money out the door, because not everyone's going to have gigabit fiber, 5 gig fiber in the United States. It's just not going to happen.
This is absolutely a fucking venture capital thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is absolutely a fucking venture capital thing. Like, this
sure.
This is investors saying, we don't know, what this cloud shit does necessarily, but we know that word is important, so we want to see you guys do this cloud shit. And like, a company like this is saying, well, we don't necessarily want to do that, and the investors are like, we're going to give you like $80 gajillion to fund it. And these guys, fucking okay, shit, I guess. And that's kind of where we are with this, where like the people making this sort of stuff probably do not give a fuck about the actual making of this stuff, but they're very much in the position of, they have their venture capital set up, they have the relevant companies telling them, invest your money into this, and we're going to throw like $80 gajillion into it. Like, for a Google, it's very much a case of, they're going to invest the money in it because they have nothing to lose. Right? Like, Amazon was a loss leader for years and years and years and years. And at the time, sort of the lay-level conversation about it was, how in the fuck is Amazon constantly losing money? How do they continue to exist if they're constantly losing money? But it's they're spending money on experiments. So when that company starts turning a profit, it's because they can't think of anything else to do with their money. And for Google, they don't give a shit if they're losing money, because it's a tax write-off for them. They invested all of this money into this to, even if it's a loss, even if they tank out with it, oh fucking well, they were going to invest the money into something, they might as well try it out now. With Nvidia, it's probably a combination of, again, they have money to burn that they can afford to lose, and they probably got venture capital that they can afford to burn, but have to use it a certain way. They're like, fuck it, whatever. It gets our name out there. It gets people talking about this. We know it's going to suck. We don't give a shit.
I think it's more along the lines of, not just because they have money to burn and they would just want something to do. I also think it has more to do with the fact that AMD and the Radeon lines of graphics cards has actually been pulling away heavily from the market share from Nvidia, and Nvidia is just now looking to invest in other things that they think that they can suddenly corner. I mean, that's why they got that little portable gaming device now for
Shield?
PC. Yeah, the Shield. Because I mean, for PC gaming, that's probably one of the best things going on. Besides, I think there's a thing called the Edge. I could be wrong, but that thing flopped like real hard.
What is this? I fucking turn this thing on, and Roman Reigns punches me in the mouth. What is this bullshit?
And outside of that, I think it's really just as Nvidia is now looking for ways to keep their name and their brand, afloat and in the minds of people, because you got Radeon is like people are preferring their GPU over the latest brand of like Nvidia graphics processors.
That's the thing, though, especially when it comes to graphics processing in the PC world. It's always Nvidia releases and it's ahead of AMD. AMD releases, it's ahead of Nvidia. Nvidia releases, it's ahead of AMD. It's a ladder for these companies, and it's always been a ladder for these companies.
Yeah, but
One
lately,
of them
these
is
last
always
3
trying
years,
to
it's
be on
been
top.
Radeon that's pretty much been pulling ahead. Usually, it's
I've
like
heard
they take
zero
turns.
things about Radeon. I've heard zero things about any good AMD graphics cards in the last 5 years. Everything that I've seen on the news, on the web, on everything, it's been Nvidia plastered all over everything. I don't hear anything about AMD except in the developer space. So I'd like to see those numbers. I'd like to see these links where you're saying that AMD is pulling away, because I don't believe it.
Okay.
And I feel like Nvidia's market share is as strong as it's ever been, because their name is on everything. So, like, I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just I've not seen it, because I don't hear about AMD that often.
No,
You know, you go to a store, you go to a Best Buy, you go to a Walmart, 9 times out of 10, all of the systems run NVIDIA and an Intel chip. They don't run AMD. And then they've got one AMD system that's running a Radeon graphics card, and it's maybe $100 or $200 cheaper than some of the other Intels at the same level, but no one's buying it because nobody knows what AMD is, especially in like the personal, like in the base personal system, like the market, because that's where people go to look for those kind of things. They buy those kind of computers from places like Walmart or Best Buy or like a big box. And all they know is Nvidia, because that's what's plastered on everything, because that's where the money's at.
Okay.
So
it would seem that the last time they said that they've had a large market share pull, that AMD had a huge market share pull away from or over Nvidia was back in 2017. So yeah, like you said, it looks like it is flip flopping. But lately, like in terms of the marketing things and comparisons of the GPUs over one another, people lately, the last like over a year and a half, have been talking about the latest AMD Radeon over like the GeForce 2080.
I mean, I'd have to take a look at it, but if it's not something that I see regularly on Tom's Hardware or something like that, then I'm not going to look into it, because it means it's not as popular, or is not as big in most people's eyes.
Yeah.
You know, there are hardware sites that'll talk about these kind of things all the time, and I just don't hear about AMD. But to sort of digress from all of that, like the idea behind what Nvidia is doing with this concept with Nvidia Go is, or with GeForce Go is it's the same concept, but it's not quite there. You know what I mean? Like, having the ability to play the games that you own is great. That's awesome. I'm super glad that exists. It's just not the time for it.
No. I mean, we're going to go back like maybe about another 15 years ago when the OnLive and the Phantom were coming out, or were rumored to be coming out, and then both of which never really came out or were not living up to their expectations, because OnLive was literally like way ahead of the time of what it was doing, and something like the Phantom. Well, we weren't going to see it. It never came out, but we saw what the would live up to it to be like, the Steam Machine and all that stuff. So seeing G4 or Nvidia try and bounce in with a Stadia Lite type of marketing ploy is kind of like
Meh.
it's whatever.
I just think it's goofy. I feel like the concept of streamable games is still so in its infancy that trying to push it this way, just, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the concept behind what PlayStation did with PlayStation Now, that makes more that is as a business model, that makes more sense than streaming your games live through an internet connection.
But PlayStation Now also sucks.
But I never said it was good, but I said the concept was good.
Oh yeah,
The idea of being
it
able
also,
to have
but it still also sucks, and
Well,
that's the core problem. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Because as long as you have the subscription, you have access to the games. But if you drop the subscription, you lose those games. The concept should be, I should be able to simply buy a subscription that gives me access to specific games and own those licenses, so that I can continue to play those games on the console. Now, obviously, PS5 is set to change that again, but we've got months before we actually hear anything important about what that's all going to be about, since Sony's not going to be at E3 again this year.
Mm.
Yep. Well, speaking about things that we're going to be hearing, looks like something leaked onto the internet in regards to GameStop and their future plans. Now, they've been talking about something like this for a long time, about redesigning some of their stores to fit a brand new model in order for them to survive. And survive is the key word here because, well, even though they have close to 3,000 stores in North America, they have closed well over 200 stores in just the last quarter, and they are dropping like flies in terms of market share. Employee morale is at an all-time low, so they go and they decide the most logical step to do is experiment by making LAN centers out of their game stores. And they're doing this as a way of taking a cue or taking the idea from like what Microsoft is doing with their stores, which is involve like a huge, like demo area. Like they still have a storefront, but they have like an interactive LAN center, community center in the background, and that looks like what GameStop is trying to see and flesh out and make work. I should have downloaded the picture to show it off on the stream. But it is all over on Twitter if you're looking for it, and it's a very interesting idea. I hope it works for them because it could. I mean, let's be honest, esports is freaking huge right now, and to be able to have a place, whether it's GameStop or a place like I forget the name of the place that's in Philadelphia. That's just not far from here. I've been there a few times. A LAN center. It doesn't hurt to have these places that you can go to practice for, competing in esports or just hanging out with friends in general. And I think it's a great idea. Probably one of the first good ideas that GameStop has had in a long time, not counting the store closing sales that bit them in the ass. Maybe you'll get a kick out of this. Apparently, people have been going to stores where they're closing down and they're buying Xbox Ones and PS4s for as much as 60% off, and then turning around and trading them in and getting like a 60% profit. So, whoops, screwed yourself on that one. So let's just go to you guys and tell me what your thoughts are on this, on the redesigned store and possible new look of the future of GameStop. Jan.
Well, LAN centers are not a new concept, so
No.
the idea of sort of what this is not entirely new. But the way they're going about it, I think, is a little different because they're still a storefront. So instead of making it like a traditional LAN center, which is just go in, pay an hourly rate, play the games, leave, it's GameStop with a LAN center. So it's more akin to like a card shop, like an actual game store where you go in and play board games and get like miniatures and play Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh and all that kind of stuff, just with more PC games. I know a lot of the card stores in Colorado that I used to go to back in the early 2000s had the setups like this. They weren't very large because at that point in time it wasn't as prevalent, and it was also a lot more expensive because the cost of the PCs were always prohibitive. The cost of the internet to run those PCs was prohibitive for a lot of those companies, so they just stuck with what they knew and did what they did. But you get those stores that had that kind of concept where you get storefront with games that you can buy and then systems that you could also sit down and spend the time play. You've got the community couch with the big screen for like tournament events, for like Madden or whatever, and you've got the PCs set up or consoles set up for gaming in the community. So it's God, it's almost too little too late. And while I think that the idea is really good, and I've always liked the concept of what a LAN center is or a game store like this is, I feel like there are still things that could also be associated with that probably won't be or couldn't be purely because of the type of business that GameStop is. And I feel like certain aspects of it aren't going to be there to allow those setups to last. It's a good idea, but man, this is basically make or break for GameStop at this point. If they follow through with this in all of their stores, that's great. But what about mall stores? What about, stores that have set hours that they cannot run past because they're in something that has hours, and every business has to abide by that or you get fined? That becomes a bit of an issue. So those stores become defunct because now they're not being able to have the same they don't get the full remodel treatment. They get the partial remodel, like the Microsoft store, where they've got like the smaller community area in the back of the store, but the rest of it is just game storefront, which is like, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's clunky. I just hope it does well because it's a good idea.
Now, you did say that it was, maybe too little, too late, and that it's already been done already, and and the LAN centers aren't a new concept. I mean, I remember seeing LAN centers as early as the late 90s, early 2000s, but in that period of time, like within the last maybe 10 years, I would say about 2013 and on is when stability for LAN centers started to pick up, because at that point, before then, it was incredibly, like you said, expensive to maintain these stores, computer equipment, all that stuff, and which case also led to the shutdown of a bunch of these LAN centers because, one, they weren't in a very good location, they weren't able to keep up with the up cost of the parts and the labor and all that other stuff. And on top of that, it just wasn't really a thing. Like, esports wasn't really a thing. At the time of, like, the rise of the LAN center, the biggest thing going on was Counter-Strike. And that was it, really. And maybe some Warcraft 3 and StarCraft. I mean, those were, like, the big things, but people weren't really going to LAN centers to play those games. They were staying at home. They had no incentive to go out to LAN centers. No one really had incentive to go to LAN centers. Now, you have incentive to go to LAN centers. I was using LAN centers. There's a place called Virtual Rush that used to exist out in Media, right next to a mall, and that's where I started running video game tournaments from. I started running DOA, I started running Street Fighter, I started running stuff in this little LAN center, and eventually it closed down. I had to start going to hotels, but now LAN centers are like a key pivotal point, and I see nothing wrong with GameStop's strategy to try and adopt that into their business culture. The problem I have with that is the execution, and although it's only happened in a couple of stores, we're not really sure how well it is working out for them until it's on a much larger scale. And again, like, it may be beneficial. Again, 3,000 stores all across North America. Some stores from their subsidiary of EB Games in Australia and Canada, UK. We have to see this in more than just like 5 locations in order for us to get a proper gauge of how well this will work. And I really hope it is successful for them because, I mean, I've had friends, even though that they hated working at GameStop because of how horribly they were treated. There's still people that work there that need a job, and it would just suck to suddenly see, over 10,000 people just suddenly laid off just because they couldn't, correct the course with this new strategy that they're trying to employ. Mark, what are your thoughts on the GameStop LAN Center?
I don't think it's a bad attempt, and the fact that they're deploying it to a small number of stores as a test market to see how well it does is a good idea. I definitely don't think we're going to see all of the GameStop, EB Games, etc. stores transition into this sort of thing because, like, there's not necessarily going to be enough space in all of your locations to do this, and some are just not going to be conducive to that. Like, one in the mall, maybe. You could maybe see, like, some kids coming into the mall and doing whatever with it. Although, the mall in general kind of sort of feels like a location where, as time is going on, they want you to spend less and less time in there, so who knows? But like, there's definitely places where you could do it, and places where there's no benefit to doing it. So I would say if it is successful in the test markets, it's probably only going to come like maybe 15%, 50% of GameStops at the most. I think it's a good attempt to try and undo the bleeding that they've been suffering as a company for a while now, and I don't really know what else they could try at this point, because just selling video games doesn't really work for anyone. The used game market that they were chasing after, they basically murdered that in its own bed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or the
And
single standalone mom and pop shops have, managed to take that back, the retro game scene, and they offer the service of, actually repairing older consoles. So
yeah, but I mean, like, even then, that's a very much
niche.
case by case basis.
Yeah.
Because I've had those sorts of stores around us appear and then disappear within the span of a year, right? So it's very much a case of wait and see, because we don't know how that's going to work out for them. I would say the one thing I do like about this is I feel like this is the first opportunity or the first instance where a major corporation has tried doing this sort of thing. Because most of the time when you see these sorts of locations that offer play space, it's been mom and pop shops, and it's proven to be very expensive. I could very easily see GameStop leveraging this sort of thing into tournament space and actually sort of building up goodwill by leveraging these sorts of spaces into esports environments, not major esports environments like the ending round of a Rocket League tournament or something like that, but like qualifier spaces or small scale spaces where you just have tournaments and people just show up and play and do whatever. I could also see this really being beneficial towards the kind of market where this sort of thing is done more regularly, like with tabletop shops. I could see this being a thing that encourages the idea of local social spaces.
I just had a funny idea pop into my head. You
Go
go
ahead.
to the card shops, you're playing Magic the Gathering. Hey, let's go to GameStop and play Hearthstone.
I mean, it could be, let's go to GameStop and play Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, exactly, that too, but
I mean, like, it's like arcades haven't really been a thing for us in decades at this point.
I mean, there is Round 1 that is continually growing all across the United States.
Which is cool, but like that's sort of taking back something that had been dead for a while. So the idea of attempting to come up with physical social spaces for gamers to do stuff and hang out, that's kind of neat. I'm cautiously optimistic to see how it goes.
Okay. So what are some of the biggest flaws and drawbacks that we could see in this? Like, do we think that if they expand it out, are they going to not be able to attract enough people? Do you think they'll have issues with, like, let's say, getting sponsorships for esports teams to come practice in their locations? Like, what kind of issues do you think will arise, Jan?
What kind of problems will arise?
Because again,
LAN centers,
one of the things
I
I
mean,
could see arising from this is that they're still keeping the storefront, but in order for them to fit the LAN center, they have to drastically reduce the size of their storefront. So
not necessarily. It's just a matter of what they put into that location. If they're actually putting in, desks with PCs or consoles, then yeah, obviously they've got most of the storefront is no longer storefront. It is the gaming. No, everything on the walls will be games. That's it. All of the stuff in the middle, like all the used games, all of the gamer swag, all of the figures and shirts and extra stuff that's normally in those stores, at that point is gone. all that you have left at that point is, nothing. You don't get anything at that point. You just have what's along the walls, which is all new games and whatever used games for the current generation is.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
I feel like they'll probably strip out some of the physical stuff, like the toys and whatnot,
Yeah, for sure.
because I definitely don't think that has worked out particularly well for them financially.
I mean, ThinkGeek went under because of them, so yeah, no, it makes sense.
Right. So I definitely feel like they are probably going to start dropping that kind of stuff. Like at the very least, you're
Yeah.
going to see a lot less space devoted to the Funko Pops. You'll see Funko Pops, but there'll be a lot less space devoted to it.
Well, I mean, if you think about the general layout of a traditional esports arena, like what they do with like the one that they have in Walmart, you go in and it's just table, 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 table systems across it. So you walk into the GameStop and you've got a little bit of entry space, and then you've got row of tables, row of tables. All of the systems are set up on these tables, and then that's it. That's what's in the center of the store. That's what takes up the majority of that location. Along the left and right hand walls, all the way to the back, and then across the back wall, you've got all of the games for the current generation of consoles. You've got a section devoted to Funko. You've got a section devoted to tablets and phones, because that's a thing that they do. Accessories, are all behind the counter. And that's it. That's the store. That's the whole layout of the store at that point. So you have to figure out how to manipulate your space based on A, how many systems am I bringing in? B, am I also going to be attaching consoles to these for other things? Like, do we want to host just PC gaming, or do we want to also do console gaming? Because then you're alienating part of your market. If you bring in consoles, you also have the ability to bring in people for things like fighting games, console exclusive games, not just single player titles. There's a ton more multiplayer base that can be accrued based on the games that you bring in on those systems. Do you want more people to come into your local GameStop to play Overwatch instead of trying to play it at home? You play it with other people in a LAN center? Heck yeah, you'll probably set that up in there. So it matters to not just what's in the store, but it's also the demographic of the people in the area. If you're in rural Podunk, Kansas, and you've got a GameStop that's got more than enough space to host a LAN center, and you put a LAN center in there, but the town's population is only 15,000 because it's a college town, maybe you've got something going because it's a college town. You take that college piece away from it, it's the same population, no one's going there.
You got to get your frat boys in there playing Call of Duty.
I'm also going to be very interested to see how this goes in areas where they already have esports type centers.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know for a fact that out in the area where Spencer lives, they have the Evansville Esports location out there, and I would be very interested to see if GameStop would even try to create this sort of environment there, and how well it would compete.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's I think the biggest downside potentially is that they pick the wrong areas to build into, and that it shits the bed because they don't get any traction. Either because they've picked areas that would be unpopular for it, or because they picked areas that would be popular for it, but they already have a solution there.
Coverage, exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to definitely, end up in a place like, I think there's at least 10 GameStops just inside the city limits of Philadelphia. And you got the esports arena that's being built right there for the Philadelphia Fusion. And then you got, of course, by the way, I think the place is called Level Up. That's near German Street in Philadelphia. And that is a big land center with
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that used to work there, and I would go in there and visit him occasionally, and he would literally be in the middle of the day rearranging all the tables, getting set up for whatever tournament was going on, be it CS:GO or Call of Duty or whatever, and so he has to move things around. But
Yeah.
but just next to that land center alone, there's at least 3 GameStops. There's at least one on Oregon Street that I know of that is not too far. It's about maybe a 15-minute drive, about a 15 to 20-minute drive away. So it would be silly. And on top of that, being on Oregon Street, that is also not that far from where the Philadelphia Fusion's esports arena is being built. So that's a really horrible location right then and there. So it's a matter of planning, like where would they in the city of Philadelphia even bother doing this?
I don't know. I feel like having if you think about how tournament venues run in the FGC, and you've got your main floor stuff, and it's this huge chunk of the center section of the area that you're in the ballrooms. And then along one of the walls, you've got like 30 separate setups, and there are just all sorts of these other random games that none of them are main title games, but they're there and people are playing them. This is kind of the same concept for GameStop. I feel like having the ability to say that because they're in the same area as these big esports arena area, they can throw in this little tiny GameStop with another 20 or 30 computers or systems and be like, come on down to GameStop where you can get your side games in, or where you can run your side tournaments on this game, over here at GameStop, or you can play the games that you can see at the, for $5 an hour, you could play at the GameStop versus the 15 that you pay at the, the big fancy Overwatch esports arena. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a matter of it being a bad idea. It's a matter of how it's marketed and how it's built. Because if you are on point with how you market what you are bringing in, even if it's saturated, it can still do well, especially on the days where big events are happening. They can be like, we're going to sponsor part of that. Oh, and by the way, the GameStop on, Orion has is a land center, now. If you don't have the ability to get into this bigger esports arena because it's tournament day, come on over to GameStop and play the games too. Like, it's a smart move. On paper, it looks fantastic. It's a matter of implementation that's going to cause a problem for these guys because they're known for not being very good at implementing these sorts of things. So we'll see. I feel like it's really 50-50 right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how that happens.
All right, so at this point right now, it's just a wait and see, and just hope for the best that maybe GameStop, finds a way to dig themselves out of their hole. Although I'm sure there's a few 100,000 people out there that couldn't care less if they managed to not dig themselves out of the hole. So we're gonna move on to the next topic, and it's a kind of an interesting one. This is kind of like a twofer topic of conversation. So starting off, I noticed a huge little argument going on Twitter. Excuse me, long day. Former guest on the show, Smash JT. We know him as Jeff Tarzia. He posted a video about a month or two ago talking about this guy by the name of John Hancock. John Hancock is also a member of the retro gaming community, a YouTuber, and has, for the last several years, been trying to build this video game museum through various donations, GoFundMes, and whatnot. And Jeff, along with several other YouTubers, released opinion pieces about John Hancock and why it's taking him so long to, get this off the ground and stuff like that. Well, Hancock apparently goes on a giant YouTube strike, YouTube copyright strike, like fiasco all over the place, striking everybody, getting their videos removed, and I'm seeing people left and right complaining about this on YouTube. To which, Jeff Tarzia of Smash JT is involved in this. A guy like by the name of Dave D is also involved, and several other people. And they all released, follow-up videos, and Hancock is not having it. In fact, Hancock even has his defenders, people lashing out at all the people that are, complaining about him. The latest person I saw that actually lashed out was Rich of Review Tech USA, who apparently drew the ire, but he didn't get a strike of John Hancock, and Hancock apparently released a video that I haven't yet to see, countering his points, but as of this morning, it looks like he has slowly been rescinding and canceling the YouTube strikes that he has placed against all of these channels. And the big problem I have here is not so much with John Hancock's attitude about, how he went about abusing the policy. It's more about the fact that such a policy is so easily abusable. And case in point, if you watched the last episode of GVN Live, you saw one of our Asshole Status Achievement Award nominees was Pokimane, and she was nominated mainly because she abused the YouTube strike policy, the copyright strike policy against several channels, whether it was for the correct reasons or for the wrong reasons, because she didn't like, people capitalizing on her video, on her footage, which, was well within her right, but even for people who were doing it under the fair use, she was still issuing strikes. And that's the thing, is that several other people who were talking about offering opinion-based pieces about John Hancock were totally fair use, especially with, using a quick screenshot of the guy. And yet still, it seems persistent that people are able to abuse the YouTube copyright system, even so much as, let's say, random bots who are of no association with, the original copyright holder laying claim to, like, a couple seconds of a musical piece that's playing in the background of a YouTube video that you made or whatnot. And it just seems like this is a constant growing problem that just never seems to get resolved. And I just want to know, like, when will YouTube actually listen and understand that they're just not going about this the right way? And Mark, what are your thoughts?
Never.
There we go. That's plain and simple. Next topic, please.
Well, it's like, this is the thing, okay? The YouTube copyright strike system is designed with the idea in mind that it directly protects the copyright holder over the person being struck. And there's a reason for that, because American copyright law is fucking garbage. And, like, let's be clear, I think that people should be able to own the copyright on their intellectual property that they create. But that isn't the way that this sort of thing is designed. This sort of thing is designed very specifically to protect huge multi-million, billion, trillion-dollar corporations from having their copyright infringed upon in any meaningful way. And the problem with that is that this sort of stuff goes way, way, way beyond the point of reasonability to basically say, if a company decides that you have been infringing on their copyright, fuck you. That's just how it goes. Fuck you. Now, 99 times out of 100, most corporations are generally going to go with claims that get the stuff monetized for them, which is more commonly what we see. Copyright strikes, in most cases, happen because, like, you've posted an entire movie online, or you've posted a whole music video online, and
Right.
Like,
you
literally broke the
originally
law.
built for.
right,
Well,
that's what that's built for. The
Right.
thing is that it's very easy to file a copyright strike, but you also then have to follow up with it in some meaningful way. copyright strikes are generally sort of meant as a precursor to legal action in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's immediately easily abusable, but whether or not it stays that way long term is an entirely different matter altogether. Like, you can get hit with a copyright strike and then like it goes away in a couple of days, a week, or whatever, because
90 days.
Yeah, or like just because like you file against it, and the person that you're filing against just doesn't pursue it in any meaningful way, right? So it's very much a case of even spurious claims like have an out, but it is functionally it is designed in a way that is protective to the copyright holder rather than the person being claimed against, because YouTube generally looks at it from the perspective of, well, we don't want to deal with being sued by copyright holders.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's fair or not, that's the way that our system is set up.
All right, John, what are your thoughts about this? Like, do you think there should be a way for them to fix this system so it's more evenly favored towards, those who are having strikes levied against them, or do you think it's just, what, like what Mark says, it's more or less for the big wigs who are just trying to protect their assets?
The issue doesn't really boil down to whether or not it should be like one versus the other. The issue is that the automation behind what this system actually provides and the tools that content creators have to attempt to protect what it is that they're trying to protect, which in most cases is their image, which on YouTube, let's be honest, that's really a lot of what everyone has going for them is their image. It's their channel, it's their content. This is their base intellectual property. However, being able to simply copyright claim somebody else who's using your image or using a clip from your content, specifically for fair use, it becomes a little bit more difficult to handle in most cases, because we don't know if the people that are actually getting dinged for this are trying to use it in a negative connotation, which normally they're not, but that's the baseline of what the person whose content is being used. So they go out of their way to basically say, well, this is bad, this is my content, I don't want them doing it. Well, isn't that what email is for? Like, isn't that what Discord is for? Isn't that what messaging is for?
Direct communication?
Like,
who does that?
Right, exactly. And so what they do is they abuse the system to try to negatively impact the other person's channel, which again affects their image. So it becomes this sort of roundabout way of creating a negative environment for other people. And I don't know that in certain cases that it's not warranted. Like, obviously there are plenty of times where it is. But when it comes down to it, the idea behind what's going on is, and in this case, most likely just really high-level trolling.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to be clear. This isn't just a problem with YouTube directly. This is a problem with the entirety of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, in order to fix the problem, you would need to introduce new legislation to replace DMCA. And that's not going to happen. Because even if we replace all of the current senators, House of Representatives, and presidency with people who would be receptive to that sort of thing, you would still need to get somebody in there who's going to actually attempt to suggest that sort of corrected legislation. And they're not going to do that. Because there's not any reason for them to.
Well, there's no money in it.
Problem with it, right? Like, Disney's not going to come to them as a lobbyist and say, well, we really need to fix this so it's fair for content creators on YouTube. Nobody gives a shit.
They're the reasons why copyright is the freaking the way it is, because he wanted to protect the intellectual property of fucking Mickey Mouse.
Exactly. So you're very much in a position where all of the people who have the money to attempt to influence this sort of thing don't want their content in any way, shape, or form impugned.
Exactly.
So it's very much a case of this is the way that it is beyond what YouTube is doing. This is the way that it is because of DMCA and things like that. And the government has no impetus to fix that because it works as intended. It's protecting the copyright holders, and they don't give a fuck about us. If the copyright holder decides that we have, done something to distribute their content in a way that they don't like, fuck you.
That's the truth. What are we going to do about it,
it's just the way that it is. There's nothing that we can do about it. It sucks, and it's awful, but there is literally nothing that we can do about it. That's capitalism. .jpg,
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. It's like there are systems in place where you can actually reach out to the content creators and basically say, "Hey, I don't appreciate you using my content, even if it's fair use, without my permission."
I mean, the new intro to our for season 5, I reached out to a content creator, Clean Tears, and I got permission to use his song or sample his song for the intro of the video of the podcast, and he said yes, as long as I don't try to make money off of it. So
exactly, but that's the thing. Is just people in this day and age of instant gratification don't care.
So yep. So YouTube sucks. No, can't say that. We're gonna get striked the minute I post this in YouTube. All right. What's that?
I said lel demonetized.
We've been demonetized since 2007. We're not gonna suddenly fix that.
Good.
All right. We're also not appropriate for children too. So yep, I had to hit that check mark. All right. So we move on to the last topic of the night, and this is kind of a very complex one because it was.
Speaking of things that are appropriate for children.
Yeah, you're so not right about that. We're going to be talking about the complexity of. I mean, at the end of this year, almost every single web browser is no longer going to be supporting Flash. Adobe has abandoned it already. Chrome, I think, at the end of February is no longer supporting it. I think, what is it, August? Everyone is, almost every web browser. Edge, I think Edge doesn't even support it, right?
No, Edge doesn't even support ActiveX. You have to go back to Internet Explorer 11 to get ActiveX. So yeah, no, Edge doesn't do it either.
Yeah, so pretty much no web browser out there will be supporting Flash, ActiveX, or anything like that, Macromedia, by the middle of this year. And with that, it means places like Newgrounds are going to become non-existent. And with that includes Flash games. And I've actually played a few Flash games that are actually a lot of fun. And the Flash games that Jan was referring to are definitely not safe for kids.
Well.
And, but that didn't stop this one guy who's designed a website that preserves almost as many Flash games as he could get a hold of, ranging in size of up to almost half a gig in size.
Oh, Newgrounds?
No, well, that site exists. No. There's what's the name of that website, Jan? You linked it?
No, you linked it.
Oh, I linked it. Yes, let me double check that. Scrolling up. All this trash I keep posting.
Here we go. Gama Sutra put out a tweet to a program called Flashpoint Launcher.
Yeah, that's right. It's a website, but you can also download a program that will allow you to download and install the Flash games to be played through the launcher on your computer. And he says it's going to have up to almost 40,000 games available once Flash is no longer supported. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind playing one specific Flash game in mind. I forget the name of it, but it was the... what's the notorious dubstep DJ that everyone knows? Skrillex. Yeah,
Skrillex,
Skrillex
yeah.
Quest. That's actually one of like the most unique and fun like Java games I have actually played in a browser. And I think people, if they have a chance, should check it out if it's available. I think the original website I played it on doesn't exist anymore. And the game will hang up if you beat the game because it uses live video at the end for the ending. Oh, which is a shame.
Mm.
But there's kind of a bit of a mixed emotions because, I mean, 40,000, almost 40,000 games. I mean, that's not necessarily all the games that are made available. So you have to cherry pick some of these games to be picked. So I can't imagine what the process is of doing that. Obviously, you probably would bypass half of like the garbage that is like, you know, simple puzzle games, like memory puzzle games and whatnot. But like, does this really mean they also have to preserve the adult games that came out for it as well? Like is this a website that has to come with an adult warning, or some kind of warning label for families who have access to this app? What do you guys think?
Well, the question is have versus should, isn't it? Like, if you're asking the question of do they have to? No, they don't have to fucking do anything they don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Should they? Probably. Digital archival is important. Like, this is a conversation we keep coming back to, right?
It's a constant
idea
conversation.
The idea of should we keep X? Should we archive X? And the answer to this question is generally yes, absolutely. We should archive X because we need to preserve the history of video games. I don't like the fact that somebody made a Flash-based remake of Custer's Revenge.
Oh God.
But should it be archived for historical value? Probably. And it's that's kind of sort of where we are, right? Like, I don't, the fact that like Armor Games is going to go out of business like tomorrow, as soon as like all the Flash games just go to shit. Like, we should probably, archive all of those games because there were a ton of games on there that people played, people enjoyed playing, etc., so on, and that should be documented for historical purposes.
I mean, yeah, for historical purposes, it is a great idea. On top of that, you do have some companies that started off as making Flash-based games. I mean, probably one of the companies that everyone knows about, Behemoth Games, started off with Alien Hominid before, and they ported it, actually made it a fully fleshed game for the PlayStation, the PS2, or the PS2, the GameCube, and the Xbox before, releasing a few other games. In fact, didn't they just announce that they're making a fifth game, which is kind of weird because it seems like every one of their games has a long development cycle now. But yeah, like, preservation is definitely key. I mean, like you said, we come back to this conversation. We're always talking about like the legality of ROMs and whatnot. But to be truthfully honest, ROMs is probably the purest form of preservation for old and classic video games. The same is absolutely to be said for Flash games. Now, in regards to the delivery device, like, these are all games that are obviously made and owned by somebody, so I didn't read too much into this, but is there going to be some kind of service fee for having access to this library? Since, 40,000 games, I'm sure it's taking up quite a bit of server space somewhere.
I mean, it's local. It's all local. So the program itself is basically, it's called Flashpoint, made by Blue Maxima, where it actually just has all of the Shockwave Flash files loaded into this program, and you launch it locally from your system.
Well, the program says it has to download and download the files locally to your device in order to play them, because they range in size.
Just SWF files.
Yeah,
it's just SWFs, and that's super tiny.
Well, they range anywhere between like
there are some really big SWF files. But
okay, so
by and large, it's most of your SWF files are probably not super big, and I mean, like when you're talking about, the like money exchanging hands and whatnot, like
It's free.
maybe if we want to donate some money to the people hosting all of this shit,
Mm-hmm.
like I could see like doing a Patreon where the guy or girl running this is just like, give me some money to help me keep server costs down. But otherwise, like no, like the game manufacturers, like the person isn't making any money to store this stuff, and the game manufacturers probably wouldn't be making any money off of this in any case, because whatever amount of money they were going to make, they kind of already made.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
So, just looking at the download page as a baseline, there's two different versions. There's Flashpoint 7.1 Infinity, which basically allows you to download the games as you play them. Not every game is listed initially and no images in launcher. You can add the missing games via the home tab and missing game images below the main download. The other one is 7.1 Ultimate, which is the full package, ready for offline use. The Ultimate version is a 241 gig download and a 288 gig extracted file. So no, it has all of the SWFs already built into the program when you download it. So it's not something that they have to actually. The only thing they're storing is this zip. So it's available. They have a streaming version of it, but yeah, it's Flash, it's SWF. All you have to do is you can go to SWF, save the SWF, and you have it on your system.
Okay, now here's the big problem though. Obviously, with Flash games, you have varying degrees of quality.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think 40,000 plus games is really something somebody wants to dig through to find the diamond in the rough?
I mean, it's not really a question of whether or not they want to, right? Like it's the question of let me put it counterpoint here. Why does that matter? You know what I'm saying? Like why are you asking this question?
Think about it. You download something, you're excited that you're going to have a shitload of games to play. Some games you've probably never played. Some games you're looking to play. There's definitely a good chance that a game that you've played is not going to end up on the list, and instead you're going to run through, let's say, a ton of shitty games. Like instead of finding the original Sonic Robo Blast, you end up with something like some furry fuckfest game or something like that. And yes, I'm pretty sure those exist.
Okay, but so what?
Okay.
My thing is I'm just wondering where you're coming at this from.
No, it's like
if the argument is that there's so much of this
to
stuff
make somebody
that you're going to miss the best games.
No, it's what is the incentive to make somebody sit through and look through almost 40,000 games to just find something that they'll click with, and if they can't find something
again,
they click
when we
with,
say somebody, do we mean the end user doing this?
Yes, the end user, the person going through this. What is their incentive to keep going to find a game that will catch their interest?
They probably don't necessarily have an incentive unless they're interested in this sort of thing to begin with. But it's kind of a niche thing in the first place, right? If you're interested in Flash games, you're interested in this project or not. So you're going to be as invested in this as you're going to be just knowing what it is. I don't think that the person who's archiving all of this stuff is necessarily doing it because they want to attract a larger fan base or anything. They're just doing it for the people who want the historical preservation of Flash games. Mm-hmm. If you're not interested in the historical preservation of Flash games, nothing's going to really convince you here to be into that. But if you're already into it, then you already know that you're going to be sifting through a ton of crap to get to the stuff that you might actually want to play, and that's going to be part of the appeal of it. You get what I'm saying?
Gotcha. All right. Well,
now keep in mind that a lot of the games that are here, one of the games that's actually in the list is a weird Pokemon Flash game that was actually made by the Pokemon Company. So it's an official Pokemon Company game that's in this list. So we're not just talking $5 chin man over here making Shockwave Flash games out of stick figures that go back and forth, in 1999, there's like the list is huge. And from what I can see here, they were saying that there are a total of 36,000 games and 2,300 animations. And they have a full list on the site that you can actually click and get the full list of all of the games that are actually in the most recent up-to-date version. So this is something that these guys are doing exactly like what Mark was saying. They are archiving Flash games, Flash animation. This whole system itself supports Adobe Flash, Shockwave, HTML5, Java applets, Unity web players, Microsoft's Silverlight, which hasn't been around for a while, 3Diva Player, 3D Groove GX, PopCap, ActiveX, Authorware web player, GoBit Games plugin, and Shiva 3D. So it's not just Flash. It is storing a ton of content that is just no longer going to be supported by any browser by the middle of 2020.
Microsoft Silverlight. Oh my god! I actually remember when I still needed to install that just to play the Windows games for Windows version of Lore of Tomb Raider Anniversary. Holy crap!
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like we're not just talking like chintzy $5 animations or like a large library of Shockwave Flash games from Newgrounds or Albino Black Sheep here. We're talking like high-end games that were created like in Unity and stuff as well that just aren't going to work anymore because these browsers aren't going to support that portion of what it needs to support for you to be able to play those games. So having this project and having the ability to store it locally so that you can still go back and enjoy these games, that's a big deal for a lot of people when it comes down to this sort of concept.
Alrighty. So, well, anyway, to the guy who compiled this whole list of games, this giant archive, my hat really goes off to you. It is a huge undertaking to do a project like this, to be truthfully honest, in the name of conservation of historical gaming artifacts. Is there anything else that you think is worth preserving outside of like retro games and in the terms of history of video games? Like, is there any like area that we haven't covered yet that should probably be discussed in the future, like outside of Flash games, retro games, and whatnot?
It's hard to say because I think like
dead platform games, I suppose. Like,
yeah, I
mean, kind of asking the question of like who owns the Jaguar library, right? Who owns the? I mean,
really
seriously.
rich people who actually care about gaming.
Yeah, like seriously, who owns the Jaguar library? Like, does Atari own it at this point? Like, the actual entity that exists is known as Atari. Do they own it? Who owns the 3DO library? Does Panasonic still own it? Did they give it to the 3DO Corporation? Who owns the assets to that? Like, that's the main thing. Is there's a lot of conversations that happen around, dead platforms, like, a Game Boy Advance or an SNES, but like, if you know who the copyright holder is, chances are good you can probably figure out if something is owned by somebody. If it is, like, you can trace it back to who would have purchased it, and if it isn't, you can categorize it as abandonware, put it up on the internet, and move on with your fucking day, right?
Like, but the entirety of the CDI library. Yeah,
like, does Philips Magnavox own that? Have they bothered to retain any of that copyright? If they have, okay, then we know who owns it for archival purposes, and if they didn't bother to retain the copyright for it,
we playing Wanda Gamelon, boys.
Yeah, you can fucking play that like the shitty Zelda games that they made, or you can play that fucking
Hotel
shitty
Mario
tennis game that would be playable on every fucking Macy's display kiosk.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi?
Jesus Christ. But like, it's the matter of figuring out like who owns who owns this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to be like, who owns Sunsoft games? Because, like, Sunsoft's Batman probably isn't owned by anybody at this point.
I mean, probably not.
But
I can tell you one thing, look at a company like Acclaim. A lot of their properties are owned by several different companies. Like, I believe the Turok license is owned by Disney.
well, I know they just released a game for it a few years ago.
They released a game for it, yes, but they still hold it, and they haven't done anything with it since the failed reboot. Well, outside of the re-releases that came out of Turok 1 and 2 on the consoles and the PC. The remasters, or whatever you want to call them. But,
Yeah, I don't know who owns that, but it's like it's basically just a matter of figuring out. Like, I think that's going to be the biggest question at the end of the day: who owns what?
At the end of the day, Disney's going to own everything. Let's just put it that way.
God, and
Well, eventually, yes, but
you're not wrong.
All shall kneel before our Lord and Savior, Mickey Mouse.
So, like, and just as a baseline, I just did a quick search on it. Like, nobody owns CDI right now. The CDI library is just abandoned as of 1996. It was abandoned by Philips in 1996.
What about the intellectual games, like individually, like the franchises? Like, I'm sure nobody has a hold of the Army Man franchise right now. Maybe Electronic Arts, I don't know. I think Electronic Arts might have published them, I don't know.
It's hard to say.
Because, I mean, it would just seem silly that, like, yeah, maybe you don't own the intellectual rights of, let's say, of a platform because the company doesn't exist anymore or whatnot, but it's like every individual game that was released for the platform is not going to revert to the copyright holder of the platform that it was released on. It would have to go back to the company that existed at the time.
So just as a baseline from what I can see here, the Hotel Mario and all of the Legend of Zelda licenses that were associated with the CDI are still in-house with Nintendo. They still own those. So if anything were to be re-released at any point in time in the near future, it would be Nintendo re-releasing those specific things.
They are not going to re-release those. They're going to deny
Not
that
a
they
chance.
even own the copyrights to that.
Oh, absolutely. It's
I'm
like
sure
not
they're
a-
ashamed that they even have the copyrights to those games.
I mean, maybe not so much Hotel Mario, because I'm sure they can just let people meme the hell out of it, but that's sort of beside the point. Like, yeah, no, they'll burn those games out of the minds of any game.
I don't know. Do you think Nintendo is really ashamed of anything that's been involved with their like that's been had their name attached to it? Because as shameful as the Nintendo games associated are from like the Philips contract, there are so many other things that they could be just as ashamed of.
I mean, I got a good word for you.
Mario
It's called
movie.
Virtua Boy.
I don't even hate the Mario movie. It's just a bad Mario movie. It's not a bad movie. I'm thinking more along the lines of like Captain N and the Game Master.
Virtua
That was just
Boy.
a giant commercial.
It really was.
Yeah, Nintendo. It's a cereal now. Nintendo Super Mario. Wow. And it had like two different bags of cereal. One was the Mario cereal, and the other one was the Zelda cereal in the box.
And then they
And
show the
both of them
character
are
art of all the
fucking
of all the monsters in Link, and then they transform into cereals, and they look nothing like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's hilarious. How about the Zelda rap?
Oh, actually, interesting. So here's what I just read. As it turns out, Philips gave up the abandoned the CDI and the CDI library in 1996, but it looks like everything outside of the Nintendo franchise games, so outside of Hotel Mario and the Legend of Zelda games that were made for the CDI, the remaining library of the games and other things that were with the CDI went to Infogrames.
Oh God!
So it's Atari. CDI is a library now. It is now owned by Atari SA.
I mean, it makes sense. If you were going to ask the question of who owns all of the shittiest games that exist,
Oh man.
Cat,
yeah,
shut
that's
up.
That's about right.
I mean, they have the Jaguar library, apparently. Now they got the CDI library. All they need is, like, the 3DO library, but not the Army Man games.
Well, fair enough.
3DO wasn't that bad. It was just a very, very poorly designed machine. All right, well, that pretty much, I think, wraps up the conversation we have at hand in regards to conservation of classic games, be it retro console games or browser flash games. And
thank God for that, because I have to poop.
Yeah. I'm just going to leave you with 3DO is owned by EA.
Yay! Makes sense considering the 3DO was originally started by a former president of EA. Go figure. But anyway, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of GVN Live. Next episode will be the 18th. So see you February 18th. And on behalf of Mark and Jan, thank you and have a wonderful night.
Bye.